name's John Braucher, and we're here for adult education and world religions classes here at Unity of Springfield on this beautiful Mother's Day.
Yes.
It's just such a gorgeous day. And today I'm going to talk, the talk is kind of inspired by Tara Brach and Thich Nhat Hanh. And it's, the title is Love in Action, Realizing Interbeing. So Thich Nhat Hanh coined the term, he invented the term interbeing and inter-are. And we'll talk about a little bit about that. And then Tara Brach took this to another level, specifically in this talk that I'm paraphrasing from her and borrowing from her, is around our responsibility and our love for the earth and our stewardship for that. And how do we have a spiritual practice that brings us into action to move towards that stewardship for the earth. And of course, I feel like I'm speaking to the choir because I feel like Unity of Springfield has done that and does that, and I'm not sure that I'm going to be giving anything too special to our group, but this is a message I really hope has a ripple effect and goes out into the community, and that we, through our practice and our deepening practice of a spiritual practice towards love and action, that we, as sometimes Sue talks about, that we start to reach a tipping point to where the wider community as a whole begins to care enough that it leads to action to protect our earth, to so we have clean water, clean air, a variety of animals and plants and other critters that are around, and that we continue to care for them. So I'm going to start with just a little meditation on nature, because there's really 4 practices that we're going to be talking about after we also talk about our separation from nature as a culture. But the practice is to deepen our connection with nature, to deepen our sense of fellowship with others, to deepen our connection with the flow of time, both those that have come before us and those who will come after us, and then really focus on who are we becoming in our own personal awakening, our own personal spiritual awakening that calls us to action. So if you just kind of get comfortable, take a couple of deep breaths. Nature is a mirror, inspiring and teaching us, deepening our sense of belonging in the world. Wherever you look, you can see that our patterns and the patterns of the natural world are the same. You can find this resonance in every form, from molecules to plants and animals to planets. We live our lives according to the same principles as the trees, the mountains, the clouds, and the birds. We begin our lives in the womb, folded in on ourselves like a bud of a flower. We can see our whole lives in the mirror of this natural form. When we emerge from the womb, we slowly begin our unfolding. Just as the flower begins to open its petals. At its prime, the flower draws many insects to it, and also the eyes of appreciative humans. When the flower's petals begin to fade and its life cycle begins to come to an end, it ceases to hold itself upright and returns to the earth. Traditionally, we return to the earth, just as all plants and animals do. Like flowers, we leave behind seeds in the forms of children and other gifts. They continue to unfold even after we are gone. Rebirth is encoded into our lives, and death is just one part of the cycle. Look around you and you will find connection and insight. Notice how your moods shift from one to another, like the sky shifts from the bright blue to turbulent grays. Your thoughts are like clouds, appearing, changing shape, passing through, and then disappearing without a trace. The rain cleanses the sky just as an emotional release cleanses your mind. The sky itself is your eternal awareness, unchanging underneath all these permutations. Let it reflect back to your own abiding perfection. As you walk through the world, find your own metaphors for connectedness in nature. Flesh them out fully and follow them as they lead you through the mystery and intelligence of life. There's a biologist named Lewis Thomas, who stated that we are shared, rented, and occupied by countless organisms, billions, which are not necessarily, they're not human. If you look at our digestive tract, there are more non-human DNA than there are human DNA. And it's both in micro as well as macro. It's all connected from here to what we don't even really know, because we now know there's portals that we can't go into yet, but we know they're there.
Dr. Strange can get you to them though.
I think that maybe he can.
No, actually, Spirit can get us to them.
And without all these organisms, we couldn't move, we couldn't talk, we couldn't think. Yes?
I like what the president of SRC Manufacturing said. The best rebuilt tractor motors, SRC says that's in our DNA, because they strive to make the best humanly possible.
Mm-hmm. So Thich Nhat Hanh said that if you're a poet and you see a piece of paper, you'll see a cloud in this piece of paper. And if you look more closely, you'll see the sun as well. Because without the cloud, there'll be no rain, there'll be no trees. Without the sun, there'll be no trees, there'll be no anything. So inside this piece of paper is also the sun, the clouds, the lumberjack, the worker in the paper mill. They're all inter-are with this piece of paper. Okay, and this interbeing concept of connectedness is that there's really nothing that we can look at that's not, that where we can really be separate. And yet, we live our life under the illusion that we are separate, distinct from whatever. Yes?
It seems to me that, it's a really hot mic. It seems to me that we are so indoctrinated from childhood on about how, especially as Americans, about how independent we have to be. We have to be aware that well, first of all, it can get pretty shoddy in a hurry because we go too far and swing too far in that direction and become so selfish that we aren't aware of our surroundings. But I love that paper, that sheet of paper analogy that you just spoke about, because I never thought about it that way, but it's a perfect metaphor for all of the interconnectedness that is within our realm, within this living sphere.
I'll have another poem. You'll have more material for a poem this week.
Just finished one. That's true.
Thich Nhat Hanh also said, in the light of emptiness, everything is. Everything else. And he talks about, when he talks about emptiness, it's emptiness of what?
Consciousness.
Can't be.
So it's, and when you're empty, sometimes we think of it as a negative connotation, but empty being, oh, you don't have this, or you don't have that. But in the light of interbeing, to be empty,
Waiting to be filled.
Yeah, or free. I
that.
like waiting to be filled better.
Vacuum.
To be empty could also mean to be free. But I like what you said, so. You're not doing.
You're up.
Oh. Well, I think a lot of what he says there epitomizes the Eastern thought from the vantage point of emptiness as a beginning, as if there is no ending, really. That you're empty so that you can use your imagination and learn how to live the dream. And I think that's where a lot of us get lost, is we don't know how to live the dream. And we begin by being empty.
yes, and I think he also means emptiness of attachment to an egoic idea of who we are and of this small self, or even small group. Sometimes we identify with a small group of others who are close to us, and anybody who's not in that small group, that's them.
Them and us.
Yeah, us and
There's
them.
them, and there's us and them.
The
And,
other.
and so we have a different sense of compassion for those that are outside the inner circle versus those that are them.
Who's to judge who's empty?
Only you.
I don't know, I think it's a concept.
I don't think a person is ever empty.
For me,
Something to be grasped at, for sure.
It's, there's a lot of that is geared towards the, what is unknown. We don't know, what the future may bring. So with that comes fear, and if there's a sense of emptiness, who and how is that going to be filled? I think that's a central aspect of what you're saying.
I agree with Dan also, and going along with that, I really remember distinctly when I was growing up and when the Beatles were beginning to dissolve, and George Harrison, well, they all went, were extremely, as everyone knows, common knowledge, strongly influenced by the Eastern philosophies. And that what I started to say is even into the music of George Harrison in particular, the songs that he wrote, I really felt that myself in my inner being, that he captured that so well. Just that need, that innermost need that humans have for becoming empty and joining some higher power. I love that.
Well, as a follow-up to that, Harrison's, his music, particularly playing the sitar, I believe that's what it's called, a type of guitar, that really, without George Harrison, I don't think they would have ever gone to,
It's really loud.
I don't think they would have ever gone to India without Harrison.
No.
And that was such a mind-blowing experience for all of them. But again, it gets back to their music and where music takes us. And that's why so much of their music is considered eternal, particularly a lot of things that Harrison wrote. Because he epitomized that selflessness and that there's a connectedness that we all share. And I think Harrison took the next step beyond I Love You, which the Beatles did, to why? Why?
But not only that, what are we here for?
So I'm gonna go back just a little bit. We're talking about our connectedness of, genetic connectedness and with the microbes and everything. And personally, and I'm not against that idea, but personally, I don't think that's the idea that's gonna bring us to caring for our world and caring for things. It's the connectedness beyond that. The connectedness of, we're all connected in one. We're all part of God. We're all the God source energy. And our power to create, to use that energy to create here in the manifest physical world. And I have a little bit of different idea of the earth because, the earth is going to eventually not be here. That's the nature of all things. It changes, it goes, and then more is created. However, having said that, we have the opportunity and the option to see ourselves from that higher connected self to create the life that we want to create. And I don't think anybody wants to create a pile of pollution to live in. I don't think anybody wants to create a lack of good things and death. And that when we understand that connectedness, the metaphysical connectedness, the truth of who we are beyond this physical world, and we stop just relating with this physical world, then our creations come from a place of no fear. And won't that be beautiful?
Well, I'm gonna go back to emptiness. Sometimes I think you have to empty yourself out to make room for the good stuff, because if you are full of the bad stuff, there ain't no room for the good stuff.
Absolutely.
So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. So Tara talks about Joanna Macy, who conducted workshops in a city near Chernobyl after the Chernobyl accident. And of course, those of you, I'm sure everybody here remembers when the Chernobyl nuclear reactor had a severe accident and overheated and basically caught on fire and blew up and spread a cloud of nuclear waste as far as Canada anyways, she was meeting with people that lived in this town, and they were like their windows and doors were all like duct taped and stuff because they were trying to minimize the air from coming in because it was still radioactive in that area. And they were not used to this. It's a very beautiful rural area where they live, not unlike where, around here, where there's, when you get out of the city, where there's just, beautiful forests and rivers and lakes and so on. And they considered themselves the people of the forest. They would go hunting and mushroom hunting and so on and so forth. And so they were sharing this with her, and one woman got kind of angry and said, well, why are you rubbing our noses in this? And a fellow, she didn't defend herself, but another fellow spoke up and he said, she's given us an opportunity to tell the truth about what happened here, because our children are not going to know, the life in the forest, not if they live here, and if we're able to tell the truth, these people can come and share this information, and hopefully this will never again happen. This tragedy will never happen to anybody else in the future. And Tara responds or reacts to this with, the fact that, well, that's just not really what's happened. I mean, she did go and they did share this information, but they had the Japanese reactor that got wiped out in the tsunami. And there's been, we still have a big plastic thing out in the ocean. It's, pile of trash that's out there. And we just haven't quite responded yet. It's still we're still not really connected. And she also talked about a study that was done back in the 70s where they put respondents in a room and they sprayed in this cloud of vapor, and it was slightly noxious, not terribly, but slightly noxious, and it would make them cough and so on and so forth. And if they were in there alone, they would pretty quickly get up and leave the room. But if they were in with other people, and the other people just ignored it, and they were they were given a job to fill out some kind of a paper and to find out about them, a questionnaire or something. And if there were other people in the room that just continued to work at the questionnaire and completed it, then people would stay, and they stayed until the experimenters came in and rescued them and took them out. And so there's this sociological phenomena that if the other people around us don't seem to mind what's happening, we tend to think, well, maybe it's not so bad.
In other words, does that create complacency?
Yes, I would say so, yeah. And complacency just by, we pick up cues, social cues off of others around us. And we're just sensitive about that. And so sometimes that's maybe some of the reasons why, it's difficult to get us to respond in a way where we're being better stewards of our earth. So in order to decide that we want to do something, it requires kind of a shift of consciousness. And we live in one of the more powerful countries who has been, a major industrial polluter as well as Western Europe. And there's obviously a consciousness about it throughout the world. And yet we haven't reached a tipping point to where some of what we're saying we want to happen is actually happening. So it's kind of a challenge that we have. And there's also this, that we're feeling it kind of at a distance, and that's that egoic trance that we find ourselves in. So Tara says, consciousness is the grounds of transformation, and that consciousness is evolving worldwide, that we're in the midst of this evolution of awakening, and that how we practice what we practice has an impact on it. And Sue often talks about that how maybe we're just, another reason why we don't do things maybe is because we feel like, no, it's just me, I'm just one person, and how can I affect anything? And then, of course, as a church, we're not just one person. We're starting to have more energy because we're a collective, and the more of us that are together doing that, it has a power.
Doesn't it create more momentum?
Absolutely. And then that's also one of the reasons why we're always wanting to reach out into our greater community as well, because we want that ripple effect to continue.
Well, there's a sense among many that our consciousness is never ending. There was no beginning and no ending. And so it's a matter of latching on to the flow that already exists, and getting beyond the ego, getting beyond self. And that sense of consciousness is not something that it's almost like it was lost due to our attachments in many ways. But it never, your consciousness didn't just end, or it didn't just begin. It's there. And it's a matter of whether or not we want to attach to it this time.
Right.
And I think that's the central theme of what you're saying.
Right. And also what she's saying is let's start, one of the things we can do is we can intentionally be involved with being connected, to be feeling more connected, experiencing more of the connection, to, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that what you're talking about now made me harken back to the first time I saw the film 2001, A Space Odyssey. And if anyone's seen that, the last scene in particular, at the end, that's what I feel like is my visualization of this existence and this, as Dan said, this never ending, I mean, there was never a start to this, and there's never going to be an end.
Right.
And I think that filmmaker depicted it better than anyone that I can think of in terms of realizing that again, though, I even felt too that there were themes of we can make a difference if we gather together as that has an effect. We're not just on here for a joyride. There's some meaning. That's what adds meaning to my life, is if I know that what I'm doing makes a difference to future generations. That it's not just about me.
Right.
You go.
So I would just say, we're all a ripple effect. Like God is in the rain, and every raindrop, we make a ripple on someone. So it is important to, spiritually connect with yourself, your soul, your heart, and share every part of you in every way that you can, because it does make a difference even when you don't see it's happening. So.
I did Native American spirituality for many years in sweat lodges and things, and one time the elder that ran the sweat lodge, everybody was so concerned and talking about we need to protect the earth, and he says, I think you guys really don't understand this. The earth will take care of herself. What you're protecting is humanity, because if something doesn't work and goes against the natural order of life, that thing evolves out of the picture and something else takes its place. And so, we think we're saving the earth, and he said, that's not what we're doing.
We're saving ourselves, absolutely. Absolutely. Like in the there's a song that has, Jewel has a song that's talking about saving ourselves. Also, another movie that really does that is Interstellar. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the movie Interstellar, but it's when you talk about because not only like in 2001, there's a big time lapse because they go into sleep mode. But in Interstellar, he goes into the black holes and comes back, and it's quite interesting.
Interesting movie.
Yeah.
Watch it. It's actually good.
So the 4 practices again, and we'll have, one of the things that she shares with us is some practices, and we'll do a little bit of that here this morning, and then we also I'm going to play a little bit of her podcast. There's then a few vows or intentions that are offered up, and we obviously have to come up with our own intentions, but I just come up with some. So again, the first one's this reconnecting to nature, sensing the heart space, the sacredness. So if you will, just again, take a couple deep breaths and kind of get centered as we think about what our connection with the natural world is. I mean, there's many wonderful parks here in Springfield, and you don't have to go far outside of Springfield to find some other beautiful woods, rivers, lakes, and sometimes it's just, you know, our gardens themselves, our plants, house plants, insects, our pets, the sun, the breeze, just that natural world that was here long before we existed and will be here long after we're gone. Though, as was mentioned before, it also will have its own ending.
Do you want?
And
Oh,
to continue to feel that connectedness, that oneness with the natural world, because we are of this natural world. We're not separate of it. We couldn't exist without it, and we impact it.
John?
I have the lyrics here to All Things Must Pass by George Harrison that really goes along with,
And as we take our breaths and focus on that breath of who we are and that connection, that knowledge that we are nature, and the sacredness both of ourselves and all that is around us. Okay, if you feel like you want to open your eyes, go ahead and open your eyes now. The next area that we're going into is the sense of fellowship. And initially, it's presented kind of as of human fellowship, that we're not in this alone. Mr. Rogers' mother shared to him when he was feeling kind of despondent over things that were happening in the world, he says, remember the helpers. And the fact that there are people that want to help, who are trying to help. There's more than ever, there's more nonprofits of people who are out trying to help others. Places like Mercy Corps go out to places where there's natural disasters and wars, and Doctors Without Borders, and there's just a lot of people and that who really do want to do good things and care for others and have compassion for others, and I think that we need to sense that connection with the fact that we're not just alone, partially because that maybe restricts us from acting when we feel like there's nobody else that cares, but also because it's kind of cool that there is this consciousness raising awareness that people care and people are in action. So we really aren't alone, and sometimes we know that we need to actively reconnect with others that are like-minded and like acting and are in action to do things, to be helpers, and to continue. And so, if you're a writer, you should write. If you're a poet, you should write poems. If you're an actor, you should act. If you're an artist, you should create your art that puts this out. If you're a teacher, you should teach. And we should share this energy and this momentum about what it is that we care about and be connected. And I think also beyond just people, we should also be thinking about, both animals and flora who are helpful, and other sentient beings. I don't know if you remember the sword and the stone, the story. Okay, so King Arthur, well, before he was king, Merlin was mentoring him, and he was sending him to experience other sentient beings, other animals, fish and birds and other animals, and so that he understood that each sentient being had a special knowledge, a wisdom, something of value. And when he first went to pull out the stone, he tried and he failed. He wasn't feeling strong. And then he looked around and he started to notice some of the other animals, and that reminded him of this power, this connection to all these other sentient beings, and that gave him the wisdom to be able to pull the sword out of the stone. And we all have access to that power. I also think about on another level the Abraham Hicks, the fact that there's sentient beings among us always, and who could be the helpers as well. Another level, not just in our physical three-dimensional reality, but just there's the helpers, and our ability to, and our capacity to reconnect with that as well.
Could you please explain a little further about those helpers around us?
Well, there's just spiritual beings that aren't in a physical body that we always have potential connection with.
I think each other too, look to see the good rather than just the bad in the world. And I think it's important, we talk in this community about consciousness and about how our mind is connected to our experience of life. And I always kind of look at it like, okay, so looking at everything that's going on in the world today and all of the challenges that are going on in the world, but what am I connecting to? Because if I'm meditating, if I'm in a state of peace, I'm connecting to everyone on the planet who's contributing to peace on the planet. If I'm panicked, if I'm freaked out, if I'm raging, I'm connected to everybody on the planet who's contributing to panic, rage. And so I think that's important too. And it doesn't mean that we don't stand up and say, hey, we can't go this far, but we, from an evolutionary standpoint, major, fast evolution on a micro level takes place when there's a challenge within the environment that could potentially wipe out the species. And I think it's kind of true on the consciousness level too, that we, oh my goodness, we have to respond to this. Do we respond with love? Do we respond with joy? Do we respond with peace? or do we respond in kind with what's going on in consciousness?
Yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh, when he was still living, he did a lot of workshops with the peace movement, and he'd always say, it's like, the problem with the peace movement is you're too angry. You know, you've got to go to President Bush and you have to write a love letter, not a ranting letter. You have to write a love letter. You have to connect. You have to be there with him. You have to have an understanding of him, because he's not trying to ruin the world, and we have to love him. Yeah. Go ahead.
That's similar to this, that I was saying, when you're talking about helpers in changing things, the people that you want to change actually are helpers, if you look at it that way. So if you look at the seahorses were all dying out. And there were people that went into the islands, and they became friends with the people, and then they said, we know we know this is important for your livelihood to be able to harvest these seahorses and everything. Let's try and experiment. Let's take one area where everybody agrees we leave the seahorses alone, and let's see how they flourish, and let's see how the numbers are for you. And they included the people and made those people, that their livelihood was part of the solution. And after they found in this one area that the seahorses were coming back and they were getting more, the islanders were the ones that began to spread it to the other villages. So they never saw them as the enemy. They were the helpers.
Good example.
Perfect.
Well, I think it's a two-way thing. Not only are there helpers out there that have always been with us, and not just this time, but also we are here to help. We are teachers. And how we act and react has a real impact, I think, on others. Because how we don't respond. Because I think there's a certain level of virtue that is inherent that sometimes gets lost. And finding that virtue that is inherent, that is within all things, and connected. But again, helpers are here, but we are helpers as well.
Okay. So the third place that Tara goes to is our place in the flow of time. So we have the ancestors who came before us, and he talks about Thich Nhat Hanh was a calligrapher, practiced calligraphy. He drew some really beautiful pictures, and when he talked about when he drew, if he drew a circle, that his father was also there with him, and his mother, and his grandmother, and generations of people who have practiced that art and handed it down and shared it, even people that he had never met, but who had just created that culture, and that was all a part, so that when he was drawing, he felt like all of their hands were in his hand as he was doing this. And that sense of connectedness can be, and of course, Native American also culture, it has a strong sense of connection to the folks before. And some Kenyan proverb is about that. You know, it's not that that what we're just borrowing this earth from our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, and that sense of also moving forward. So another practice that Tara asked that we do, Dr. Brock asked us to do, is to focus both on where, who are our mentors from the past, and if we imagine not just other people, but also ourselves, seeing ourselves in 5, 10, 20 years, what will we think about what we have done today? And to look at that perspective, not just in the current moment, but also what comes after us, and finding because there is a flow of time, at least in our three-dimensional as we know it, and there's that's just another level to connect at. Okay. And then finally, the fourth one is really the one that's more of a call to action, or could be a call to action, but that's asking ourselves, who are we becoming? As we find ourselves awakening and becoming more aware, which is, I always like John Kabat-Zinn's concept about scaffolding, that, we'll have some kind of a level of awareness, and then, we can see a little higher, and then there's another level of awareness beyond that, and we don't ever really stop growing. But we're always in this kind of state of awakening if we're focused on awakening and being aware and spiritual growth. And what does, when we're connected with this awareness of our awakening, and what does that call us to do? As we're presented with love, what's the call to action? What do we want to do? And it might not just be with caring for the earth, as we did in our Earth Day celebration recently, but also, as well as every day, but also with each other and with our wider community, plant, animal, natural world, spiritual world, those that we don't know yet, that haven't been born yet. What's our relationship? How, what do we do with that? So I'd like to, go ahead.
You just leave each day as better than you discovered it in the beginning. Every night when you go to bed, it should be better than when you woke up. You should leave everyone you meet and everything just in a better place and with growth, whether you planted a tree or, gave like the church, and I think that's the best thing that we can do, is just keep moving forward and doing the best thing that we can every day to empower everyone around us and leave each day better than when we woke up. And it just keeps getting better and better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
James has the announcements if you're winding up. Oh, okay.
Is that a reminder?
No, I didn't know what he was doing on his own. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna play something, but I just was getting a little towards the end.
Okay.
So the gal who went to Chernobyl wrote some vows She says, I vow to myself and to each of you for the healing of the world, that I will try to live my life more lightly in terms of food and energy and what I consume, and draw energy from all species and my ancestors, and to support others for the work in the world to make it a better world, and to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in following the previous vows.
Thank you, John. That was wonderful. All right, we are going to go ahead and pass the basket. No, you don't have to put that on me. I don't need. No, I'm serious. I don't need the video on me. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and pass the basket. And if you want to give online, you can give through PayPal, ccunity@sbcglobal.net. You can also give through the Tidely app, Unity of Springfield, or online at the website www.unityofspringfield.org. And we have Clay. He is going to do the announcements.
Can the camera go on you?
I don't mind. I'm an attention hog, you know that.
There we go.
Okay, everyone, these are the announcements. Everyone is invited Friday, May 13th. Come test your luck at game night hosted by the LGBTQIA group. The fun starts at 6 p.m. Bring a snack to share. Drinks will be provided. Next week, May 15th at 9:15 a.m., the new Thought and World Religions class will be presented by Clay Holmes, moi, on the book Another Place at the Table, an insider's look at foster parenting. Please join us in Fellowship Hall next week after the service to celebrate Sue's 65th birthday. There will be cake and an ice cream bar. Saturday, May 21st at noon, we are holding a volunteer appreciation extravaganza. There will be lunch, dessert, music, and games. Please sign up in the foyer so we know how many to prepare for. The next indoor yard sale is June 3rd and 4th. You can start dropping your donations off on May 15th. Clothing and small furniture pieces acceptable, no electronics. There are immediate openings to volunteer for the reception desk Monday through Thursday. Shifts are 10 to 1 and 1 to 4. You must be able to learn the phone system, greet visitors, take messages for the staff, and communicate upcoming events. Sometimes we have small projects for you, and if not, you're free to read a book, do games, entertain yourself. See Lisa Landrigan to sign up and get answers to your questions. Starting Wednesday, May 18th, Amy Burnett will be teaching Prosperity Plus. This is a 7-week commitment to a wonderful class written by Mary Morrissey and taught here for several previous years. Materials are $49 and pre-registration is required. This concludes the announcements.
Thank you.